everybody. Welcome once again to the Jackson Interaction Podcast. I'm your host, Gene Jackson, and we are rolling right along with our series of interviews with comedians. And I'm very excited about today's interview. We got a very funny man that's going to be on the show. And tell you what, let's just get right to it. Let's bring him on right now, Mr. James Etchison.
Hey,
James, how you
Gene.
doing, buddy?
Doing really good today. Yeah, how are you?
Doing well, man. Doing well. I spend my Sundays most of the time doing podcasts. So this is number two of three today. So
You do 3 podcasts in a day? That's insane. That's
here
so.
lately, that's what it's been. That's what it's been. So
I do one every 6 months with my son, and yeah, it's
I don't know how we got here. Started out doing one every 2 weeks, and then it turned into one that was weekly, and then one that was bi-weekly, and now all of a sudden we're cranking out three a week, and I've got another one that's about to start up soon. But most of them are pro wrestling related, and
yeah,
I wanted to. I've been meeting so many interesting people doing stand up, and everybody's got some fun stories and interesting ways of coming into comedy and different views on comedy, and that to me is the most fun and interesting. Like in wrestling, there's a certain way to do certain things, and you kind of have there's an element of it that you have to follow, or somebody's going to get hurt. But in comedy, um, there's a mild structure there that you kind of have to follow, but it's a lot more wide open, and especially your path you can take to getting involved and getting started. So the way I usually start these things is I don't know of anybody who finds their way onto the stage that wasn't a fan of comedy in some shape or fashion growing up. But at what point for you can you put your finger on a time, maybe a certain comic or a show or something where it kind of clicked in your mind of, hey, I don't just like this. This is something that I want to do.
yeah. Comedy Central presents Mitch Hedberg. Basically, I watched Comedy Central presents like crazy. I was a big comedy fan in high school. And still am. That's kind of when it started. Comedy Central, and they would have all these comics on, and all the comics were kind of somewhat similar.
Yeah.
And when I saw Mitch Hedberg, like my mind was completely blown. I was like, this is so different, and I love it so much. And yeah, I think I guess then I didn't really so much think I could do this, but like the seed of that thought was there, and I loved Mitch Hedberg so much, and it was just like, oh, you can be kind of awkward and goofy, and you don't have to be like, I'm the guy, right? You just kind of
Yeah.
there's different ways to do it, and I don't think like I've tried to emulate that, but it's just the idea that something different is a little, and I guess that's kind of very been done a lot now and stuff. But I saw him um, at Auburn University 2 weeks before he died, and that was just kind of like a
Oh,
really
wow.
lucky thing. Yeah,
That's awesome. Because I was actually planning to try to catch him the next time he was in Atlanta. Was kind of the closest he was coming to me over here, and yeah, before I was like, all right, he's going to pop back up over there before long, and then all of a
yeah.
sudden, the next time I saw his name, it was he had passed away, and I was shocked. And I say shocked. I mean, I don't know. I guess shouldn't
It
necessarily
was
been
awful. I
shocking.
was such a big fan at that time. Yeah,
Yeah, but
he did a
like you
lot of
say,
drugs.
man,
Yeah, for
his
sure.
presentation was so different, and he was just a lot of fun to watch. Because, like you say, at that, especially in that time frame that we're referencing, you could watch 20 comedians on TV or live, and 18 of them would probably be very, very similar.
Yeah, yeah, and they would all be good. They could all be good, and
Oh
I'm
yeah,
fine with that. I don't mind, that there was a popular style. I didn't think I could relate to that as like me performing until I saw. And Dimitri Martin was another one who was just like kind of a little low key, and then I guess Stephen Wright was kind of like the older one that kind of did
yes,
similar kind of stuff.
yeah. I was a big fan of Stephen Wright back in the day too.
Yeah, for us, we were raised kind of strictly. I mean, I guess you don't want your little kids to listen to a lot of the stand up that's out there, but it wasn't super strict, but we were allowed to listen to Stephen Wright just because my dad and my uncle were such big fans, and so we had a little CD of his, and we listened to it over and over again. Just hilarious stuff.
I liked it because guys like him and then later Mitch Hedberg were it was unpredictable. Like most comics, you could kind of feel in the setup where we're headed. And then Stephen Wright was always in left field. And Mitch
Yeah,
Hedberg much the same way. Like you couldn't predict. Like okay, I know where he's going with this. And even if you thought you did, you didn't. And that's what made it so much more fun to me, at least. Is like, oh God, I would have never even thought to go there. And so once you did get it in your head, like, hey, this is something I want to do. How did you set out doing that? How'd you go about actually making your way to a stage?
yeah. Well, but what made me realize, I guess, that I should probably do it. And I've been thinking about it for years. I took a speech class. I think it was my senior year in college, and we were allowed to do like a presentational speech, and it's kind of encouraged to be kind of funny, And I killed it. I mean, for speech class, I killed it, And everyone's laughing,
Yeah,
and like people were talking to me who, like, in college, people don't really talk to you that much, if
yeah,
unless you have something reason to. And then people were talking to me like, you were so funny, and then they were talking to me every day and stuff, and I'm like, oh, this is a good way to kind of come out of my shell because I was really like reclusive then. Um, at least in college more than high school.
right.
And then so it was like 2 years after that I'd been like thinking a lot about doing comedy and like how much I wanted to, and I just never really knew a huge. It's huge. It's a theater, and it's not huge, but it wasn't huge then. But nowadays, like they get a big audience of almost 100 people just to watch anyone do anything,
Yeah,
5 minutes or less. Yeah, I don't know. If, I guess Nico was on here before. She may have talked about it, but yeah, it's the same place we both started.
that's cool. So, and then this has been like one of the more interesting topics to talk to people about, both on here or just in general. Is so when you prepared to, I mean, you took that speech class and you were familiar with speaking in front of people, but when you were getting ready to go perform comedy, um, how I mean, what was your did you know had you done like did some reading? Like I read like all kinds of books and all this different stuff. Like how did you prepare for it? What was your process of joke writing per se?
I had a friend at the time who was going to start with me, and he did it a few weeks after me, and yeah, he was my best friend in high school, and name's Brett Johnson. You cannot look him up. He does not really do much stand up anymore, but he's one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life. It was him and me, and we would write together, and we would be able to like have that first, hey, is this funny? Does this make sense? And then give each other notes and stuff, and a lot better than it would have otherwise. Where because I'll tend to think of things that are like funny to me because I have more information in my head than I'm revealing it wrong, and it's just like nobody understands what I'm saying sometimes. So I've gotten better about that, but back then especially, I was just like saying a lot of things that seemed like nonsense because I mean they were funny to me.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of value in that, like writing with somebody, um, or maybe a group of people. We would write like scripts and stuff just for fun, and yeah, it was really helpful. And I don't really have that as much now, but I have a lot of friends who I could easily call up and say, hey, let's run jokes together, and I do
Right.
sometimes, but I think a regular thing would probably benefit me still today. Yeah,
Yeah, I was like the complete opposite. Like I all my prep and writing was all completely alone. I didn't run it by anybody. My ex-wife now that I was married to at the time, um, didn't laugh at anything. So I thought, like, man, if I run this by her, she's not going to laugh at it. But then I'm
yeah,
going to wonder, is it just not funny to her, or is it not funny at all? And so I wouldn't test anything until I got on stage. And I think I could have benefited from exactly what you're talking about. And later on, because I've done this off and on since 2006. Like I'll get into it for a little while, and then I'll get sidetracked back into wrestling for a while, and then I'll come
yeah.
back to it. And so a few years back, I took stand-up class, a workshop over at Stand Up Live in Huntsville that was being run by Jonathan Craig and Scott Eason. And there was about 20, 25 people in that class. And so we would go in there and they would, go over some topics, and then they would break us off into groups, and then we would work on material, run it through each other. And then we'd get to go on stage and perform it each week. And this thing was like 6 or 8 weeks. And it blew my mind it was like a whole different world of how quickly I was coming up with material, because you went through the whole process in like a 2 hour period. You sat down, you come up with stuff, you run it by people, they helped you with it, they gave you feedback, they give you tags, and within the 2 hour process, you were on stage doing it in front of, because as well as I do, starting out especially, sometimes you're not in front of 20 people at a gig. So even if it's a comedy class, 20 people is a lot of people. So that was a big, big game changer for me. And I thought, man, why haven't I been doing this whole time? And then once I got out of that class, I realized, like, well, I don't have that many friends involved in comedy, and I'm right back to like I was before. I'm just doing it myself and then going on stage and figuring it out.
Yeah, no, like you said about not being in front of really many people. I kind of got spoiled by having my first open mic pretty much be this theater setting with a lot of people, and I made a lot of friends. And I didn't realize that, like, you go to the bars, and then I started doing that not long after that. But
yeah,
I was just like, oh, this is hard actually, and that made me get better versus just kind of like being just at one place where I could get easy laughs, probably, compared to the grind that I think is very valuable.
Yeah, it's a necessary evil, and it's the only way you really get good. But it's a big difference between going to a gig where everybody's there to see comedy. That's why we're here. We're here to sit down and listen to this person on stage, compared to when you're performing in a bar, and some of the people are there because it's comedy night, but most of the people are just here to have a beer and eat some cheese sticks, and they don't give a shit. And so now you're trying to fight for their attention.
Yeah.
I used to wrestle. Now I just manage and do the commentary and stuff like that. But I
That's
wrestled
so
for
cool.
a long time, and then started getting too old and broke down. So, the
Yeah.
getting in the ring part and falling down was my least favorite part. So I started
Yeah.
managing, and then I started doing commentary and doing these podcasts and all that kind of thing. But
That's
yeah, I've
so
been a
cool.
huge wrestling fan since I was a little kid. So that's all I
It's
ever
one
wanted to
of
do was wrestling and comedy. So I've gotten to do a little of both. Neither one at a very high level, but enough to have some fun.
I anytime I go to any kind of wrestling, whether it's WWE or Dragon Con or whatever it is, it's such a good time. It's so impressive to me. One of the best kind of live performances is watching people, fight and then have gimmicks and stuff, and it's just such a good time.
It's crazy to me how similar the two worlds are of, like, especially like independent wrestling and comedy. It's very similar in how it all works. It's very strange, but for people that watch the podcast are like, oh shit, we don't want to hear him go into this again. But um, I here about a year and a half ago, I took one of my wrestling characters and brought it on stage. And so sometimes I do comedy as Gene Jackson. Sometimes I do comedy as this Whitey Jenkins character that I do start out for wrestling, and now I've done it on stage. And I was talking to Wes and Nico as well, and of course Tyler, because me and Tyler did commentary on a wrestling show together. That's how we first met, through a mutual friend. And I told him it's weird that it's actually easier for me to write material and do comedy as Whitey Jenkins on stage than it is to do it as me, because I know exactly who, because it's just a dumb redneck character. And it's like, I
Yeah.
know exactly who that guy is and what he thinks and how he is. And when the minute people look at him and hear him open his mouth, they know who that guy is and they know how he thinks. And it's like, in comedy, you've got, in most cases, 10 to 15 minutes, sometimes more. But if you're just starting out, you got 5, 10, 15, if you're lucky, minutes to go up and do your material and kind of get people to figure out who you are. And you kind of alluded to earlier, and like in your earlier time starting out in comedy, there's certain jokes that don't work if people don't know you, they don't know what's going on in your head. It's only funny if they can relate it in the context of your personality. If they hadn't learned your personality, then the joke doesn't exactly work. That's why it gets easier the longer you've been in, because once people are like, "Oh yeah, that's how he," we know how James thinks of that, so this is funny.
Yeah,
Well, you
yeah. I'm
kind of
glad.
already, it's kind of cheating because they already like, okay, Whitey's a dumb redneck. Yeah, we know that's what he would say, or we know how he's going to feel on this topic. So it kind of feels like cheating in a way, but it makes it easier. So
Yeah,
kind of weird. I kind of like doing the character more than I like being me because, and I said this out loud. I had to go back and rewatch. I'm like, that sounds weird. Um, I'd have a better idea on stage of who Whitey Jenkins is than I do who Gene is, and that sounds bizarre. But I say all this not to make this about me, but in comedy, you always hear people talk about finding their voice and finding their stage persona. So I say all that to say, how long did it take you to find your voice on stage and find your stage persona, and how different, or is it at all different than the James off stage?
I don't think I found it yet. It feels like I'm always like thinking about it, not enough, and then too much, and then it's mostly me. But I think there's some aspects of my personality that I'll test it at an open mic and realize that like this doesn't fit with what I'm trying to present, even though it is true to me. It's just not true to me on stage. And I think what you said about like doing Whitey Jenkins or any kind of character like that, like you were saying, like comedy's less structured, and I think that's true because you can do whatever you want. But I think you have to set that structure for yourself in order to have what I think of as like a sellable character, like that people will buy into the character, even if it is an aspect of you. You can't be as multifaceted, I guess, or you can be, but it has to be funny and it has to be something that people buy into. They're not really there to hear jokes always, and more they're here there to like accept you as a funny person, and that's why delivery is so much more important than what you write and how it can vary so much from show to show based on your mood and stuff. Um, I think that's really interesting that you said that like it's easier to do the character. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense to me because if I'm not putting up boundaries and like rules for myself, then I'm all over the place and it's not coherent. Yeah,
And that's really why I do this podcast. Is what I enjoy about this podcast, and it's what people who are fans of comedy have told me they like, is getting that kind of insight. Because most people who don't know anything about comedy and they just like it think, oh, well, you just figure out you're a funny person and then you just go up on stage and you just be funny, and it's like, it is not at all what it is. Like, I wish it was. I wish it was that simple. Because
yeah,
like, I'll come up with material and then I'll try to work it into, okay, this is the set I'm going to do Saturday night, and I'll think about where I'm going to be doing it and look at it as a whole, and I'm like, I really like this new joke. I feel really good about it, but it doesn't fit with this other stuff, or it kind of contradicts this one over here. If I say this joke, it kind of cancels out this joke. So they're going to be like, well, wait a minute, that's funny, but it goes against what he said earlier. So then I have to pluck it out. But what's been good is now I kind of have these two categories. Like, okay, will this work for Gene? Yeah. All right, we'll put it over here.
yeah,
Okay, this doesn't work for Gene, but I can spin it and structure it and I can make it work for Whitey. And so I found in writing that's helped me a lot because I'll have an idea of like, okay, that doesn't go for me, but I can make dumbass over here do it. Or, vice versa. I could come up with something like, that's so dumb. Like, all right, well, Whitey Jenkins can do that because he
yeah.
would say something dumb. Or I would come up with something in Whitey's voice and go, no, that's too smart for him. People wouldn't think he
Smart.
would think of that. And so then I change the voice around and I put it and work it over for me. So it's kind of neat in that aspect. But it's also challenging, constantly working on two different characters, for lack of a better word, and two different sets. Because the guy asked me last night, um, I was at a wrestling show, and I guess you can kind of appreciate this if you've watched some wrestling. I was sitting there and getting changed, and this guy goes, "Hey, when you do these comedy shows, do you like Mick Foley it?" I'm like, "What do you mean exactly?" He's like, "Well, I see, like, I seen a show advertised here. couple of months ago, and you shared a flyer that had Gene Jackson on it and it had Whitey Jenkins on it. He's like, "Did you do both?" And I said, "Yeah, I
uh,
hosted and opened the show as Gene, and didn't do well, almost by design. And then I came back out as the feature as I did like 10 minutes as Gene, and then I come back out and did like 25 as Whitey." He's like, "Oh man, that's so cool. You got to
yeah.
love doing that." I'm like, "No, dude, I hated it." I'm like, "The club owner loved it because he paid one guy for 2 sets." I said,
Yeah.
"But trying to memorize 2 different sets, I was like, I don't know if you've ever done that. Like, you're in your head pretty heavy, especially if you're doing a longer set like that. Trying to work it all out, and you've got 2 different sets bouncing around your head." I said, plus I was hosting as well.
Yeah.
I said, so no, I don't like doing that. And I've got, a couple of different uh, bookers that keep trying to get me to do that. And I'm like, no, no, no. I did it a couple times just to see if I could do it, because I thought it was kind of a fun Andy Kaufman-esque thing to do.
Yeah.
Because when we first come up, me and the club owner in Anniston first come up with it, he's like, I don't really know of anybody who has come out and performed on the same show as 2 different characters, not presenting it that way. He's like, there's people who like change into a different character on stage, or they talk as 2 different people. He's like, but I don't know. It's like, here's this guy, and then 20 minutes later, and here's another guy, and you're not supposed to know. And the sad thing is, they don't. I mean, I got a silly wig and sunglasses and a hat, and I can't tell you how many people leave out there not knowing that the opener and the third guy were the same guy. Like, I just think it looks like me in a silly wig. But I've had a bunch of people go, I was there the first time that I had went up as Whitey, and I was in the bar afterwards without none of that on. And the club owner didn't really know me as Gene. And he's just like, "Yeah, Whitey here." And the guy's like, looks around me like, "Well, you were the guy on stage with the," and I was like, "Yeah." "Oh my God, I didn't know that. And then, of course, comedy is not like in wrestling. You try to keep that separate. Like, there's that show I was talking about I did last night. I at one point I was doing both characters on that show, but the storyline was the fans knew that Whitey was Gene. Gene had gotten thrown out, and now Whitey shows up, and the promoter doesn't know, but the fans do, and so that's where all the fun was for them, is them constantly screaming, "That's Gene, that's Gene," and they did a whole story out of it. Comedy's not exactly the same. They don't have kayfabe in comedy, if you're familiar with that
Yeah.
wrestling
Yeah.
term. But
Oh, that's brilliant. That's amazing. Yeah. The only kind of experience I've had doing characters for Halloween, I'll go sometimes, or I've done this twice, is Zombie Dangerfield, and it's the zombified version of Rodney Dangerfield. And I was surprised, like, obviously I'm not writing jokes as good as Rodney Dangerfield did, but I was writing them about being undead, and that kind of made them funny. Where I I found it like very. I had the structure from somebody else, that I was impersonating, to write my own jokes. I didn't steal his jokes,
yeah.
but I just kind of was doing like as a character for Halloween, and yeah, I really enjoyed that. It was such a good time. Yeah.
When I was scrolling through your Facebook to grab a picture to put in the thumbnail that we'll put
Yeah.
on here when we put it on YouTube, I saw that picture, and I looked at it, and I'm like, please tell me that's like dead Rodney Dangerfield, or a zombie
Yeah.
Rodney
Yeah.
Dangerfield, because
Yeah.
that's what that looks like. So for you to confirm that, I wish I could see footage of that somewhere.
Yeah, I
That's
wish
a
I
hilarious
recorded it. I
concept.
don't know how I could
Because
not
I'm a big
record that.
Dangerfield fan. That's
Yeah, me
awesome.
too. Yeah, it was such a good time, and I love Halloween, because doing comedy on Halloween is just, I don't know, it's just a lot of funniness to be found in it.
Absolutely. So, what's your favorite aspect of comedy? Do you enjoy the writing more? Do you enjoy the performance, or the satisfaction of getting the reaction that you wanted from the writing and performance, or just all of it?
Yeah, that last thing, I like it when people laugh at me. It's kind of like my drug, other than the other drugs or the alcohol and stuff. But yeah, I love the feeling of, I don't know. It's just so validating, and like, oh yeah, I'm a good person now. I have quality to me, because, it's when you make people laugh, it's almost like, you've gotten what you wanted from them by manipulating them, but in a positive way.
Yes.
Like I know people who obviously everyone's met people who are emotionally manipulative and in kind of a selfish way. And in this, it's
Yeah.
just like we're both having a good time, but I made it happen. And
Yeah.
it's just a good feeling. Yeah.
It's it's such a person who, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know if you sit at a table with a notebook or you're somewhere with your phone, because I know that's a big thing now, is just putting notes in your phone. I do a little of both, but to sit down with nothing and pull from the air a concept that you think's funny, but it's like, will other people think that's funny? Will they get it? Will they understand the reference? Will and to come up with that and then fight in your head. I mean, and like I said, now you've had friends that you could bounce it off of and get their response. But again, they're your friends. Your friends are often going to be like-minded, and they're a lot of times you're going to get the same thing. So to come up with it and then go out in front of a group of strangers in most cases and put it out there and it works. They laughed. You got that reaction you wanted. Man, there's really no other place to find that. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
in your daily life, you say something to make two people laugh at work or whatever. But I mean, like I say, complete strangers, because that's the thing is you get these people like, oh, I could be a comedian because I make all my friends laugh, my family laugh. Okay, well, you know what they find funny.
Yeah.
And so, along that same train of thought there, um, have there been many instances where you've come up with something, you felt really good about it, and you went out on stage and it just didn't land, and then you had that long ride home, even if it's 5 miles, it's the longest 5 miles of your life because you're
Yeah.
just running it over and over in your head.
No, the drive was much longer than that. Yeah. No, it's just
Usually, yeah.
it feels really bad, and I think it felt worse towards the beginning, the first few times it happened, or the first several times it happened. But I think there's you got to try, and this is hard, but to look at it like, here, now I know a joke that doesn't work. I can look at why it didn't work and fix it, or I can not try to tell it again because I know it's not going to work. I just got to like be able to be aware on stage of why people aren't laughing, and it's easy to do with like other comedians where they're on stage and be like, oh, they didn't laugh at this because you said this and this and this and that you forgot this part. And especially if people and you know their jokes, you're like, oh, this is what you did differently. But when you're on stage, when I'm on stage, I'm like trying really hard to be aware, but also be in the moment, and it's difficult. But yeah, when I just bomb and stuff, it's just it's not as bad, but it always hurts. Like it always feels bad.
Oh, it does.
Just even if you can like say I can learn from this, it's like I wish it didn't happen. I wish it just worked.
I mean, me and Wes Sears talked about this last week. Is um, you're driving home and you're just like, that wasn't fun. Like, I could have
Yeah,
been doing something fun tonight. I could have hung out with my wife and watched a movie or something. Like, why do I put myself through this? And that's that initial thought, like say driving home. And if it's a long drive, and they usually are, you as a comedian, as the kind of people we are, by the end of the drive or by the next morning, you've passed that and you're like, I think if I do it this way, I think I can get them, and that's what sends you back out there the next time. Is like, I think I figured out what's wrong. But then there's also, and I want to know if you've run into this. There's the saying, it's never the audience's fault. There's no such thing as a bad crowd. But there are certain times that I have done material that has consistently worked for me, and then I go in front of a particular audience, and it just bombs. It just does not work, and I'm like, wow. And then go the next week somewhere else, different crowd, and it works like it always has. It's like some audiences are just different for whatever reason. Now, maybe it's something in the room that night. Maybe it's something somebody said earlier, and now this joke feels different because of something that was, I don't know, but like, is there anything more frustrating than that? Something that's always been a home run and you strike out and you're just like, what?
yeah, yeah. No, I definitely have experienced that many times. I don't think it's not so much for me. I don't really like that phrase. There's no such thing as a bad crowd. Of course there are. We all, if you've done this a while, there's some crowds that you just can't win, and you know that you did put on a good performance, and they just weren't buying it. Whether it's the fault of the previous comics or the smallness of the crowd or the beliefs of the crowd or whatever it is, I think it's more just you can't control that. You can't change your material, or you could change your material to suit what they want if they're even wanting to laugh. Like if you're in a restaurant where people didn't know there was comedy and they don't laugh, you kind of just have to say, oh yeah, they just wanted to eat. That's fine. They weren't here to laugh.
Yeah.
But some people are just negative energy in the room or something, and I don't know. It's not so much. I don't think it should so much be. There's no such thing as a bad crowd. Don't blame the crowd. It's don't focus on that. Don't always focus on the crowd when you're there and before, but just move on if you feel like it was just a bad crowd and it's just not something you can be like worried about because it's not within what you can control, which is even though you are controlling the crowd in a way, you can only control what you say and not the circumstances. Um, and I don't think you should beat yourself up about it either. Like if you have a bad set that, you know, really ever. I mean, it should be fun and you shouldn't be like, oh, I'm not funny enough. I'm not good enough. Like you are probably. You probably do pretty well. Not you specifically. I'm talking about
Yeah, I
anybody
know
in
what you're
general.
saying.
That's what I say to
Yeah.
myself. I'm like, no, I know I've made people laugh and I'm funny and I don't have to feel bad about this. Uh, and then I tell myself that and then I'm like, no, I do. And then I feel bad about it.
So, what has been your most memorable show so far? Like a particularly like really good night that stands out as like, hey, this is my favorite thing that I've done in comedy, or favorite night that I've had in comedy so far.
Oh, there's a show I do sometimes. Probably the first time I did the block in Fort Walton. It's just I love to drink and I drink a lot and it was just they're really nice there, the owners and stuff, and the crowd was fun, and it was just the first time I'd done a show like that, and it was just a really good memory. And then also, even like my first time or certain nights just starting out at open mics, like sometimes it was just a memorable night that was fun, and it was great. But I think that would be the best example. It's like, oh, I'm at a club. I'm at a club that does comedy, and I'm doing a show, and yeah, I'm legitimate now, or something like that.
Right. Yeah, I get that. So what are your aspirations in comedy? Is this something you just do for the enjoyment of it and it kind of is what it is, or do you have a specific goal in mind? Do you want to produce shows? Do you just enjoy performing? Like, kind of what's your next step? Do you think?
I I never want to produce a show ever again, but I'm going to, of course, because it's kind of necessary. I just we're we're kind of mixed. We're like every time I produce a show or host a show, it's very stressful and not fun, and so I resist doing it. But I think it needs to be done anyway, so there will be more shows. Um, I know I keep bringing her up, but Nico, like, she produces these shows and hosts them so well that it's like
Yeah.
we would be like really shit out of luck without her in our scene and stuff. So, and then over in Montgomery, they do a good job too. Uh, my aspirations though, when I started, I was like, oh, I need to get famous, and then I was like, oh no, I can't get famous. I don't have rich parents, and I have to work, and it's just how it's going to be.
Yeah.
But making people laugh is kind of why I like it and what I want to do, and I would love to reach more audiences, and I would love to, um, do that. I'm never going to go full time. I mean, that's just how it is. I
Yeah.
have to make more money than comedy would pay me for a long time. But I would like to like go to bigger cities and perform there and stuff if I could.
Yeah, we're on the exact same page, man. And that's kind of like I was saying before, where the comedy and wrestling are very much the same because the path's the same. Like, you have to go and starve for so long to get somewhere in comedy, and wrestling's the exact same way. And I would never be able to afford. I mean, I'm 45 years old at this point. I would never be able to afford to go off and do that. And I'm exactly with you on producing a show. Like, there's people that are meant to do it. Nico's one of them. Bless her heart. We need those
Yeah.
people. I'm not. I don't. I don't intend to ever do that again. I hated promoting wrestling shows. I don't want to promote comedy, but thank God somebody does. I hope I can get down there and do one of those shows down there in your area. I see the lineups all the time now that I'm friends with everybody, and I would love to come down there and hang out and do a show sometime because looks like a lot of fun. And I know y'all got some great comics down there, and look like y'all draw some pretty good audiences and have a pretty loyal following of people coming out
Yeah,
checking y'all out.
sometimes we do, and I would really love for you to come down. That would be amazing. Yeah. And we'll
I'm gonna hit
definitely
up
get
our
John.
producer friend and see when we can
Yeah,
make that happen. And Dan Alton, a guy that performs with y'all down there
yeah.
quite a
Oh
bit.
my
I got to
God.
do a couple of shows with him last month, I guess. Yeah, October, and
Yeah.
had a lot of fun hanging out with him. The shows went terribly for reasons that were neither one of our faults. But I had fun hanging out with him before and after the show, and we got to talk comedy and talk wrestling. I wish I'd have recorded a podcast with him. I'm going to get him on here and record one through here, but we had enough time before the show. I guess we could have recorded one in person, but yeah, man, he's just me and Fomby talked about it. He's just one of those guys that he's just funny. Like
He's
that guy
so
could read
funny.
the phone book and be
He's
funny.
my
Like he's like a
favorite.
living cartoon character, is how Tyler described
Yes.
him. And I like you couldn't that you nailed it, dude. There's no other way to describe him.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
But he's
Tyler's also.
all over the place.
You talking about Tyler Fomby?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
talking about
Yeah. Well,
Dan. Like Dan is
we,
like he was like, oh, I
Dan.
was
Yeah.
here.
No.
Like
No.
I
I
was
just
going to
meant we were on the
Philadelphia,
same.
and
Yeah.
like wow,
Dan,
they're
I think
all
is
over.
one of the funniest people on the planet, and I even if I hear a joke that I've remembered because it was so good, and hear him tell it, I just die laughing. He was making fun of my laugh on the last show. I was trying to hold my stomach and stuff. It was just he's so intense. And then yeah, Tyler Fomby is one of the greatest comedians on the planet too. And
Oh my gosh, I
I
met
can't get
Tyler for
enough
the
of
very
him.
first time. Like at that show where they had a wrestling show outside of GT South, I think it's called down
Yeah,
there in Montgomery.
yeah.
And so me and him met like 5 minutes before we sat down and do commentary on this show. And so we didn't go over a whole lot. And he's like, the promoter said we could pretty much say whatever we want to. And I was like, yeah. And so some shows I've done that on, and they're just like, just get as dirty as you want, say whatever you want. And others are like, well, within reason. And so I really didn't know where we were at on that one, but Tyler had talked to the guy more than I had. So we sit down and we start calling the match. And I don't remember the exact context. I just know he said, like, uh, come on corduroy, and I'm like, okay, that's where we're going. All right, we're going all out tonight. And after that, it was game on. I was like, all right, me and this guy's going to get along, and so we hung out that
He's
night, and I
such a
had him on the
treasure.
podcast, and he's hilarious,
I need to go back and
and
watch
that
that one for sure.
that led to reaching out to Nico and her being on, and then I had come across a couple of your YouTube videos, and I was like, man, I gotta
Hey,
get
I'm
that
doing a
guy on the show.
podcast.
He's funny.
Sorry.
Yeah, you'll end up seeing a cat run across my screen eventually, I'm sure, before
Yeah,
this
I
is
got my
over
door
with.
being knocked on. Yeah,
That's cool, man.
fine.
But
Um,
I mean, you being a wrestling fan, maybe we can have a 3-person commentary down there next time they have a show. Get you in there with me and Fomby. I think we could have a lot of fun doing that.
yeah, I don't know if I could do that. I don't know enough about. Well, I do know a good more than the average person about wrestling. I don't know if I could commentate, but I would definitely love to watch that more than most things. Like it's so fun to just. For me, it's like almost like when I go see magic or magicians or whatever. I have no idea how they do any of those tricks, especially like the up close stuff. And so I'm like, "You're really magic. Don't lie to me." And like that's how it is with wrestling, where it's just like I
It's
know
much
the
more
work. I
fun that
know
way.
there's work that goes into it, but it feels so like so amazing, and I don't want to learn about it. I don't want to learn the behind the scenes, to be honest. Because when I did that with
No.
comedy, comedy stopped being as magical to me, and so I there's some things that I'm like, I love this. I don't want to know anything about it.
The worst thing I ever did was get, as a wrestling fan, was get involved in wrestling, because I have never, since the day I got trained to do it, I've
Yeah,
never watched it the same, because everything I've ever watched since was like, all right, how did they do that? Or they
yeah,
didn't do that very well. They were supposed to do this, and you can, and
yep,
you can't unring that bell once your
yeah.
mind is going that way. You can't undo it. So that's just how it is forever. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm gonna go drill out the part of my brain that knows how to do comedy, so I can enjoy comedy again. I don't know. I enjoy it live. I just when I watch specials on Netflix, I'm just like, all right,
who do you like, if you're just watching comedy just for enjoyment? Like, who are some of the people now currently that you like to watch or you find funny?
James Acaster is amazing. John Mulaney. Um, oh my god, I'm drawing a blank on this guy. He does impressions. James Adomian. For some reason, like when he's on, so like podcasts are a little different where they'll make me laugh really hard sometimes if people
Yeah,
are doing impressions, because impressions I don't know how to do them, and like just the idea of like just pretending to be somebody and then doing a goofier voice version of
yeah,
their voice, it tickles me. Like dumb stuff makes me laugh more than smart stuff now. Even though I try to like I can appreciate all the smart comedy, and sometimes it makes me laugh, but it's gotta have this kind of like surprise factor that it's hard to get me with. Um, but I still enjoy it. I'm just kind of like over analytical and just sitting there not laughing a lot of the time when it's on TV or
yeah.
whatever.
It's hard to not get that way. John Mulaney, his bit, uh, my favorite meal I ever had, about being
Yes.
that is one of my all time favorite comedy bits. Me and my wife just cackle like idiots every time that ever comes on. If we hear the start of it on like XM or something, we have to sit and listen to it all the way through.
Yeah, I'll pull it up to show people. If anyone doesn't know who John Mulaney is, I'll be like, listen to this track, and then you'll be
You will be a
instantly
fan.
hooked. Yeah, it's so
Absolutely.
good. It's the best story. Guy with his anger management. God damn it, it's so funny.
Yeah. Just talking about people doing voices. We were traveling to Mississippi yesterday to do that show, and we were listening to a Norm Macdonald podcast with Dana Carvey as the
Oh
guest. And
yes, I've
I
seen
had
that.
never heard that one, or ever saw that one, but we were just listening in the car, and man, those two. Dana Carvey is one of my all-time favorite people to ever be on Saturday Night Live, and
Yeah,
I listen to him and David Spade have a podcast where they interview all these. Well, I don't think it was intended that way, but it's turned out they're mostly interviewing just ex SNL people from the show, and then like guest, or yeah, like guest hosts like Tom Hanks and guys like that. It's been a really interesting podcast, but the way Carvey can just go in and out of those voices and those characters and
yeah.
everything,
He's
like
probably one of the best
I
ever.
aspire to be even a tenth as talented as that man. It's
Yeah, I love
crazy.
Dana Carvey and Norm Macdonald, of course.
Oh
He was one
yeah.
of the best. I would have listed him, but I just drew a blank. I guess.
Um, I'll be about to go to bed and flipping around on YouTube. I'm like, well, let me watch this old Norm Macdonald weekend update. And end up down a rabbit hole, and it's midnight. And I need
Yes,
to go to
I
bed at 10:30.
watch.
I'm like, oh,
My YouTube recommended is just so many like shorts of Norm Macdonald just saying something in an interview, and I'm like, oh my god, he was the best.
the simplest one, but one of my all-time favorite lines from Norm Macdonald on Weekend Update. He's like, this week the top bands in the world came out. That was a number like a 100 or whatever. He's like, uh, the number one band in the world, better than Ezra. Number two, Ezra.
Oh man, yeah, I had not heard that. That's so good. As a '90s alternative fan, that
Exactly. Most people are
hits.
like, I don't know who that is. Like,
Yeah, no, I know better than Ezra for sure. Oh
so I
man,
mean, I wish there was uh, a way to get into something kind of like sketch comedy in this part of in this neck of the woods, because I really enjoy that and I think I would like doing it, but like there's really nowhere in Alabama that I know of within a reasonable distance that I could go be involved in something like that. But I
Yeah,
think I would enjoy it.
I'm on the same page because I thought, okay, I'm gonna make a YouTube channel where we do sketches, and then I was like, oh, there's lighting, there's actors you
Yeah,
have to pay sometimes. There's you have to have a nice camera that like picks up sound and stuff. I'm like, I can't do all that. And then I'm like, I know people who can. I'm like, I'm not gonna. They won't do it for free, and I don't expect them to. And it's just more of a production than I realized, I guess,
yeah,
than just like shooting videos with my friends. Because when I did shoot videos with my friends, it was just like these look like shit. Like, to be honest, like,
yeah.
and we're not good actors.
Yeah, when you start looking at that, I mean, a lot of it looks simple, but you start breaking down like what all is involved, like the background and like say the lighting and the costumes and all that. It's like, whoo,
Yeah.
one little short sketch, that's a lot of money you're talking about there. That's why I
Yep.
wish there was somewhere I could go and just show up and be like, hey, tag me in. I'd like to
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
it, but yeah, to get it together on my own. But I mean, me and some of my friends are starting to. We've got some ideas for some silly videos and like all these different characters I've got going on. I think I halfway recruited Wes Sears last week when he was on the show because he lives here close by, and I was like, "Come up with a character. You can come do some of this Waddy Jenkins shit with us, And so that's what a buddy of mine that was been watching. He's like, "You're just doing that podcast to recruit people to come work on some of your comedy stuff, aren't you?" And I was like,
Oh
"Well,
yeah. Well, count me in. Count me in for sure. I'm always looking to work with people, and
hell yeah."
I'm in for whatever.
All right. Well, I'll keep that in the back of my mind. Like I said, I'm gonna try to get down that way maybe after the first year and
Yeah, I hope so.
do a show or at least hang out
Sooner.
or something. So as we wrap things up, I know we talked before. You didn't really have any specific shows you want to plug or anything, but for like I said, if you got some hilarious stuff on YouTube, just tell people how they can find you on Facebook or your YouTube channel, so they can go check some of it out.
Yeah, yeah. YouTube.com. If you type in my name, I'm very lucky to have a unique last name, but it's James Etchison. You can go to youtube.com/ETCHIJA if you want, but it's probably easier to just type it in. Um, TikTok is tiktok.com/James_Etchison. So you can watch the stuff on YouTube in shorter segments. And Facebook is James Etchison. You would type in my name. I don't know what my URL is. And I'm off Twitter because I'm done with that. So Reddit, and then Reddit's zombie hey 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 oh, like the Cranberries song is my username.
Hey, there you go. Well, there you go. And like you said, sometimes like my real name is not Jackson, but my last name is unique enough. It's impossible for people to spell or pronounce. But
Oh
like you said, that does have advantages because it's not like, oh, I found that other James Etchison that
yeah,
does comedy on
yeah,
YouTube.
yeah.
Like, no, that's the right one. So good job
It's
on
me.
that. So thanks for coming on, man. It's been fun talking to you. Love to have you on again. And like I said, I plan to get down there and see y'all. And if I can ever get us past the talking stage of trying to do some stuff, some character stuff, and start recording some of it, I will definitely hit you up, man, because
Yeah, I would love that.
your sense of humor seems to gel with me and some of my goofy friends. So should be fun.
Hell yeah, yeah. And I hope we get you on this to get you to come down. Like you said, we'll definitely have like a show for you. I think. I'm
Awesome.
speaking for Nico right now that she's going to put a show on for you.
Awesome.
But yeah,
I may bring Whitey with me too. God knows, I
yeah,
don't
yeah,
know.
for sure. Bring the whole pantheon, the whole split personalities in your head, and I know you contain multitudes, so let them all pack into your mind and bring them down.
Awesome. All right, James. Appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And check back real soon for an announcement on who the next comedian will be right here on the Jackson Interaction Podcast.